Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Lee Pritchard. This evening, we commemorate the 81st anniversary of the loss of the Australian light cruiser HMAS Perth I, and more than 350 members of her crew in the Battle of the Sunda Strait on this date in 1942. The bell that you've just heard being struck was recovered in 1975 from the wreckage of HMAS Perth I. On the 28th of February, HMAS Perth and the heavy cruiser USS Houston were making for the southern coast of Java. Late that evening, they encountered the Japanese Western Invasion Force at the northern entrance of the Sunda Strait. The convoy was escorted by a large Japanese flotilla of 2 light cruisers, 8 destroyers and a mine layer, supported by another 4 cruisers, an aircraft carrier and further destroyers. Heavily outnumbered, the Australian and American crews were soon running low on ammunition and changing course constantly to avoid attacks from every direction. They fought desperately against impossible odds. Together, Perth and Houston succeeded in sinking a Japanese transport and a mine layer, and they severely damaged a further 3 transports. But under the weight of Japanese numbers and superior firepower, the end was inevitable. Japanese ships launched 85 torpedoes during the brief engagement. Perth suffered her first hit from a Japanese shell at 11:26 p.m. Soon after midnight, the first torpedo struck. With her crew reduced to firing practice shells and illumination star shells, a second torpedo hit Perth shortly afterwards, and her captain ordered, "Abandon ship." Perth was hit by 2 more torpedoes before finally sinking at 25 minutes after midnight on the 1st of March 1942. The action was all over in just under an hour from the time the first round struck. Houston, meantime, continued to fight. Although ablaze from enemy fire, she was rent by shell and torpedo explosions and sank just 20 minutes later. The captains of both vessels perished with their ships. Of the complement of 686 men in HMAS Perth, over 350 officers and ratings perished in this, her last action. Of the 320 survivors captured by the Japanese, 1/3 died during their long ordeal as prisoners of war. Of the more than 1,000 American officers and men in USS Houston, less than 400 escaped the sinking of their ship, and only 266 of them survived the harsh regime of brutality and starvation in Japanese prisoners of war camps. Australian sailors would undoubtedly wish us to also remember their brave American comrades today. This evening, we remember the sailors of both vessels, as well as those of the other Allied warships, Australian, British, American and Dutch sailors who were lost in the series of engagements in the Java Sea while attempting to repel large Japanese invasion forces. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors that returned home. This evening, we warmly welcome the family of Chief Engine Room Artificer John James Madge, whose story will be told shortly. We're honoured to welcome Rear Admiral Chris Smith, Commander of the Australian Fleet, representing the Chief of Navy. Mrs Jan Chataway, widow of able seaman Frank Chataway, HMAS Perth I survivor and subsequent prisoner of war. Vice Admiral Russ Shoulders, retired, former Chief of Navy from 2005 to 2008. Mr Peter Everly, President of the ACT Area HMAS Perth Association. Mr Alex McGowan, President of the Naval Association of Australia, ACT Section. And all association members who have joined us to commemorate the 81st anniversary of the loss of HMAS Perth I. We also warmly welcome the representatives from Canberra Girls Grammar School, who are also attending this evening. And as always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We warmly welcome the members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors to the memorial, and students representing Canberra Girls Grammar School. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, attention! Catapult party, present!
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden
If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Chief Engine Room Artificer John James Madge. John Madge was born on the 24th of May 1909 in the Sydney suburb of Redfern, the son of Percy and Mary Madge, who had emigrated to Australia from England before he was born. Known as Jack, Madge grew up in Balmain alongside his sisters May and Lucy and attended Balmain Christian Brothers School. He was in senior cadets, joining the 30th Battalion in 1923. Following his education, he went on to begin an apprenticeship as a coppersmith. In 1931, Jack Madge married Florence Meehan. A daughter Anne and a son John were later born into the family. Madge joined the Royal Australian Navy on the 7th of August 1933, signing on for a period of 12 years. He began service at HMAS Cerberus. As an engine room artificer, he used his experience as a coppersmith to maintain and operate marine engines and other mechanical equipment. Initially involved in training at HMAS Cerberus and HMAS Canberra, in April 1940, Madge joined HMAS Perth as Chief Engine Room Artificer. Perth was one of 3 modified Leander-class light cruisers used by the Royal Australian Navy during the early part of the Second World War. Initially patrolling the Western Atlantic and the Caribbean in search of German shipping and escorting convoys, Perth was later transferred to the Mediterranean Fleet and helped to escort convoys to Malta, as well as playing a role in the Battle of Cape Matapan. Perth then escorted convoys to Greece and Crete and helped to evacuate Allied troops. During those operations, the ship was badly damaged by Axis aircraft. After Perth returned to Australia for permanent repairs, Captain Hector Waller assumed command. Early in 1942, Perth sailed from Sydney, joining an escort for a convoy of 4 oil tankers and 2 cargo vessels on a mission to claim oil from the Dutch East Indies before the Japanese invaded. The Japanese invasion was as swift as it was effective. 2 weeks after the fall of Singapore, Perth and the heavy cruiser USS Houston were making their way along the southern coast of Java, the only large Allied ships to have survived the Battle of the Java Sea the day before. The Allied vessels retreated and attempted to resupply, having been ordered to sail for Chillichap via the Sunda Strait. On the evening of the 28th of February, they encountered the Japanese Western invasion convoy at the northern entrance to the Sunda Strait, escorted by a large Japanese flotilla of 2 light cruisers, 8 destroyers and a mine layer, and supported by another 4 cruisers, an aircraft carrier, and more destroyers. Heavily outnumbered and running low on ammunition and changing course constantly to avoid attacks from every direction, the Australian and American crews fought against impossible odds. Together, they sank a Japanese transport and a minesweeper, then severely damaged a further 3 transports. But given the weight of numbers and superior firepower of the Japanese force, the result was inevitable. Perth suffered her first hit from a Japanese shell at 11:26 p.m. Half an hour later, Captain Hector Waller ordered his ship to try to force a way through. But with her crew reduced to firing practice shells and illumination star shells, Captain Waller was forced to give the order to abandon ship. Perth was hit by 2 more torpedoes before sinking shortly after midnight. USS Houston continued to fight on, sinking 20 minutes later. Perth lost 350 officers and men, including her commander, Captain Hector Waller DSO, and Chief Engine Room Artificer, John James Madge, who was 32 years old. With no grave but the sea, today he's commemorated at the Plymouth Naval Memorial in England. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Chief Engine Room Artificer John James Madge, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Catapult party, shoulder, and
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave but the cruel sea, no flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult party, present! Arms! Catapult party, shoulder, arms!
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, inwards, turn! Catapult party, quick, march!
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.